Crystal Shaw cared for her husband Eric and their family through his 3 transplants. They both have wonderful insights to share.
So I had a form of cancer called mycosis fungoides. It's a relatively rare skin cancer. And some of the symptoms, obviously a lot of bumps can form, a lot of scars. And mine was the version that came with a lot of itching, which that probably was one of the most difficult things to deal with. Doesn't really allow you to sleep very well. It has an impact on you visually. So, sometimes it's hard to look at yourself, causes you to go through a lot of mental struggles as well. In general, just living day to day with the disease is very, very difficult. And I can just say without support, without family support, without, the support of my wife, Crystal, it would be very difficult to survive it. And, the treatments to deal with it also are pretty difficult. I've been through many, many forms of chemo and radiation over the years to subdue the disease, not really a cure, but really to delay the disease from taking over. And many of them were pretty harsh over the 7 to 8 year period where we were trying to treat it. And then at the end, the ultimate cure is a bone marrow transplant, which I went through 3 of those. And, thank God the miracle is that the 3rd one cured me. So I am fully cured 100%. Only a few side effects from that journey, but all in all, I'm definitely a heaven-blessed miracle to still be on Earth.
So as a caregiver, when my husband had cancer, I was the one that took care of him, as far as like the medical needs, just the day in and day out when he had transplant, cooking food, running errands, taking him to and from the doctor's appointments, making sure his medication was done correctly, making sure he took the medication, contacting doctors anytime there was an issue, and just taking care of him and our family. When we got closer to transplant and there was the process of us starting the transplant process, we actually had to move from our house for about 5 months. And so then there was special trainings that I had to go through in order to help with being a caregiver during transplant, which is very different than just a day in and day out caregiver. So transplant caregiver, there was a lot of, there's very specific things around what you eat. So you had to cook a certain way. You couldn't heat food up in the microwave. Food couldn't sit out for longer than 15 minutes. You couldn't reheat things like on the stove, had to be in the oven. Once you put it away in the refrigerator, there was only a certain amount of time as far as days before you had to toss it out. You had to make sure that you wiped the counters down. You couldn't use the same dishcloth or dish towels. We used a lot of paper towels that we used. If you used a dish rag, you had to use it only one time and then get rid of it. So there was a lot of very specific things around bacteria and infection to make sure that those things didn't happen. So there was that part of it. Plus there was, managing the pills, which there was lots of pills. So then it was, every Sunday managing the pill container, making sure things were set, making sure that he was actually taking the pills, making sure he ate. So there's a lot of timers that I set. And then managing our kids. And at the time we had 2 little ones and then we had 2 older ones that were away. And then we had the 2 smaller ones. So just managing the two things was kind of a lot. So a lot of it was just kind of trial and error, right? So I would get tags to put on the food containers so that I could write the labels to know, like, this is the day I made the food and this is when I need to get rid of the food. Looking online to try to find like cleaning cloths and certain types of sprays and HEPA filters and things like that, just to kind of keep the environment as clean as possible. And then, when we came in the house, like taking our shoes off outside, and then before we came inside to not kind of track in extra germs. And when my kids would come from school, bathing them right away to kind of get the germs off of them so that they wouldn't touch him before, because of his immune system was so compromised. And so there were just a lot of extra steps, things that you just don't normally think about, that we had to put in place. You know, we had never dealt with this before, and so I didn't know anyone that had gone through this, and so there was not really anyone to ask any questions. So a lot of it was just looking up things online, and then just looking at the handbook, and then trying to be like overly cautious, and so kind of planning a few extra steps just to make sure that nothing was done that would compromise him. So one thing that I discovered was just keeping a spreadsheet. So I created a spreadsheet where I would list like all of his medication out. So the times and the medication and the quantities. And so then what I'd make is pill containers. I made sure that everything was done correctly so that I didn't overlap anything, that we didn't miss anything. You know, making sure that the food, like a schedule of when he needed to eat, I just created a spreadsheet for that to document everything, to make sure that he ate. And so it was just a matter of kind of keeping track of things. And so those things, like just the spreadsheets and the charts, were really helpful, because when you get to, 25 pills, it's a lot. And then you start to forget things. And so, and it can be dangerous if you forget to take a pill or if you give the wrong pill. And so it's really important to be very organized. When he first got diagnosed, our youngest was 3 months old. And so, managing, and I worked full time. And so the managing of my job and my children and we had 2 in high school. So managing all of that, and everyone's schedule, it was a lot. But when we moved and we started the transplant process, the day in and day out managing of things, it can take a toll when it's just you by yourself and you're trying to. I get up early at 5 to try to have like a little bit of quiet time, do a daily devotional, and then move into making sure, get the kids breakfast and then get his breakfast and then get the pills. And so, it was overwhelming at times. And I remember one time was that there was kind of like a breaking point and kind of a transition when it was very overwhelming, and there was no really place to go as far as like quiet time. So going from, living in a large home where there's, multiple places to kind of move if you need this kind of alone time, to 800 square feet with 4 people, it was challenging. I remember it was like, I think the girls were at school and it was just Eric and I at the apartment, and it was like the emotions and just the weight of the whole situation it became like almost like the walls caving in. And I remember just having like an emotional breakdown, and that's when I realized, I said, okay, I have to figure something else out. And so for me, it was figuring out and managing that schedule, and just knowing that I needed to figure out when I can find time for me and how I can find time for me. And whether it was, like I said, a quick 10-minute walk around the complex, if I could get someone to come over longer and then I could run to the store and just kind of wander around Target, or go to the gym for 30 minutes. It was just a time where I could just put some music on or just have quiet time and just kind of recharge. So that's when I realized like it was important to make sure, like it couldn't just be go, go, go and then fall apart. It had to be go and then a break, and then go and then a break. Our faith in God, it definitely held us together. Without that, I don't think we probably would have made it. We have a really strong faith, and our church was a huge support system. Checking in on us, checking in on Eric. I mean, the odds were not good, right? So they had said that after the first 2 transplants failed and there was no donor, it was September, and he was in the hospital. He had no working blood system, and the doctor said, we only have one option, it's your brother. And his brother was only a half match. And they had never done that type of transplant before at Stanford. It had been done at Johns Hopkins, but not Stanford. And so he was basically kind of like a guinea pig, you could say. And it was like almost like a Hail Mary, right? It's like, okay, we're going to try this and we're going to hope it works. And we just prayed, and we knew that God didn't bring us to this point to leave us. And we just prayed, and the doctors were just blown away that it worked. But not only did it work, but it worked to the point where he didn't have GVHD. He didn't have any lingering side effects. Every step of the way, we were just like thanking God for this miracle of his healing and his health. And so, to go from 7 years of, your spouse being sick and, not really able to do all the things that they would like to do as like a husband and a father, but then to the point of now you're healed and now he's able to, do all these things, take the kids to their activities, and he's back to working full time. And, we can take family vacations and all those things that we were not able to do. And then now we're able to do. It's just, it's a blessing. So when Eric initially got sick, he was diagnosed in 2013. And then he was actually sick before that. We just didn't know exactly what it was. We had been pushing to get a second opinion. And so when we finally did get the second opinion at Stanford is when we fully grasped like what was going on and how severe it was. The type of cancer he had affects 2% of the population, and it's a rare form. And so we were always working towards transplant. The problem is that transplant, we didn't have a donor. Most minorities, it's difficult to find donors, and so African Americans specifically. And so it took us 4 years to get a donor. So this is a verse that was really important to us during this journey. It's Romans 12:12. It says, "Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, and faithful in prayer." So this was important because we knew that through this journey, right, we're finding joy in the journey, but we also know that there was a lot of trials. And then, our prayers and just our faith in God helped us through this process. Like, it strengthened our relationship. It really solidified us as a team working together. It brought us closer together. The other thing that was helpful too is, and I think this is the critical part for caregivers, because you're an advocate for your patient. And so it's really important you're at the meetings because you're the one speaking on their behalf. Sometimes the patient is not even alert, right? There was some times during the third transplant where Eric was not even coherent and he didn't even know I was in the room. And so if I wasn't there, for days at a time, then I wouldn't have been able to address some situations because he wasn't able to speak on his behalf. So that part is really important. And then I think it's important also to kind of build that rapport with your healthcare providers so that if something is going on, you feel comfortable talking to them, and that they're receptive to what you have to say. Because at the end of the day, it's a team, right? We're working together as a team for the same common goal.
Just saying the word caregiver doesn't encapsulate all that she was for me. Yes, the standard caregiver answer is she took care of all of my needs, and took care of all of the needs of the family. When I couldn't participate in caring for the family, she did that as well. Taking care of making sure all of the nurses and the doctors were doing everything that they needed to do, making sure all the right questions were asked and answered in terms of my care. But here's the part that caregiver doesn't really address is the support just mentally. And when I couldn't care for myself, because it takes a special unselfishness to really go into that extra territory, to truly give of yourself and putting her own needs aside so that she could be there to support all of my needs, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. That type of care is unique, and There's only certain people that can truly do that, and Crystal is one of them. So she was all of those things for me all at once and for the whole family. So she's extraordinary. I still don't know how she did it all, but I'm just so thankful that she was in my life so that she could do it all.
I think that it's given me purpose as far as like knowing, like helping others, right? So we're very intentional about if people we meet are dealing with cancer, someone will call us and ask us, hey, so-and-so is dealing with this, could you talk to them? We're definitely very intentional about making time for that and making that a priority, because we know the struggle of cancer, and I know the struggle of being a caregiver, and I wouldn't even say struggle, just the journey of it. And so we know that if we can help somebody else through that process and help them to be able to find joy in the journey, but also to be able to make it easier for them, we actually, through this process of cancer and this journey, we've been in contact with other families that are affected by cancer. And so it's kind of been like us walking in our purpose. You go through things for a reason. And so your trials become like your testimony.
For more information, to sign up for our newsletter, and to connect with us on social media, visit bmtinfonet.org.